I am so happy to have Will Lathrop back here again. Thanks for coming back, Will.
It's my pleasure.
We
Thanks for
we
having me.
didn't scare you off, I guess. Yeah. Um, Thanks for co-hosting, Kristen,
Thanks
once
for having me,
again.
Andy.
My name's Andy. You can follow me on Instagram, Northwest Fresh Podcast. Yeah, I wanted to just get started with telling me about how the campaign's been going. It's been a while since we talked last time.
Right.
And just kind of where you've been going around the state, what you've been hearing from people and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've been working hard to just get in front of as many people as I possibly can. So I've actually been able to have speaking engagements in all 36 counties now in Oregon. So I've
Wow.
been able to get a sense of what people really care about in every corner of the state. But I spent a lot of my time since we last spoke just here in Portland, going to neighborhood associations, going to different business association and groups and micro communities across the city, trying to better understand the city and what people need and expect from law enforcement at the state level.
Yeah, and you were just at a Southeast thing last night, right? A
The
Southeast.
house party, or at least that was on
Yeah.
your social media.
Where was I last night?
Safety. Oh, Crystal Brand. We
Yeah.
posted.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
right. So, yeah, sorry. No, that was actually posted last night, but it was
It
a
was
few days prior.
okay.
That's why I
Yeah.
was wondering. Yes,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, very
Recently,
recently. Yeah.
sorry. Yeah,
It's all good.
yeah.
I was gonna ask you, this is kind of just a funny question, but because I grew up in Grants Pass and I'm
Oh,
guessing you've been
yeah.
down in Southern Oregon a little bit.
hmm
Yeah. What are they like concerned with down there?
You know, the United States, since I came back from my work in Africa, it feels really, really divided, and Oregon feels really, really divided. But in some ways, I think we're more unified than we've ever really been in my lifetime, in
Hmm.
that everywhere I go, people are a little bit miserable.
Hmm.
And it's generally from the same things. Grants Pass, we were in Ontario, which is
Mhm.
way far away, or we're in Portland. People are really concerned about fentanyl. They're concerned about growing lawlessness, inability to get a housing, and sort of this fragile economy that we're all worried about. So I think people generally are frustrated about the same things. They have some different answers of how we change that, but I think they're frustrated by the same things.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I was gonna ask. Like, what do you see a top three state concerns? Are those kind of what you were just talking about? Yeah.
Top is just obviously public safety. People don't feel safe. They particularly within that umbrella of public safety, it's child protection. People just don't think that we're doing a good job of setting a healthy environment for our children to go to parks, go down the street, go to school,
Mhm.
and or be online or be on phones. And so
Yeah.
law and order is really, really high. The second thing is obviously homelessness. I think when I was surprised to find out in Ontario, they've had this exponential growth in the amount of homeless people that are in their community, and they don't
Hmm.
have any services. They don't have any ability to deal with that
Right.
problem. As Idaho and Boise start to push homeless people out of public spaces because of the Grants Pass decision that
Mhm.
was overturned, they're coming to Oregon because of our Senate, or excuse me, our House Bill 3115, where we
Yeah.
codified, where we legalized
Mhm.
sort or because
Because
these
I
tent
felt like it
cities.
went a step further.
It went a little bit further. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. And so
And
I think
people
that
forgot about it.
I think that homelessness issue is really, really big, and then the economy and just available housing also is something I hear a lot about.
yeah, it does seem like it. That's kind of, but with this upcoming election, those are just like everyone's mind. Are
Yep.
those three things? Yeah, I was curious. Like, what do you feel that way? Because you have kids. Like, do you? I don't
Absolutely.
have kids, but I feel like that because when I was growing up, it just seemed like, and maybe I don't know if there's a generational thing, but I would just go play outside all day and like go to the store by myself, and I don't see that happening really anymore. But
Well, I mean, mine do that, but it's not without
I,
story and incident. A lot. Like, running home because somebody was chasing them,
mhm.
or drug addicts making comments about their bodies. I mean, they're little kids,
Yeah,
it's like kids having their bikes stolen out from under them. I mean,
and I know, and we'll talk about this later too, but I know fentanyl is always a scare,
oh yeah.
a terrifying thing with
Yeah.
that and
Yeah.
kids and
It is. Just to add to that, of course, there's the things you see in your park or your playground where your kids used to go out and play
Yeah.
outside, and that in yourself. I'm a parent. I've got an 8-year-old son, and just a lot of places where kids are supposed to go don't pass the eyeball test, so you don't let
Mm,
them do that because you as a parent you have a duty to protect your children. But it's also online. It's also on phones.
Yes.
Junior high kids, the amount of
Right.
sextortion that's happening in schools and the amount of online sexual exploitation is up 520% in the last 7 years. Online exploitation has happened in Oregon. And so your kids are less safe outside the house, and then there's more access to them in their house
right.
than there's ever been in human history. So parents are working
Yeah.
hard, trying to keep up with the inflation, the housing prices. That makes our kids vulnerable because when you're as I'm talking to you right now, I'm not sitting with my son and making sure he's
Right.
not on this side or doing something else. And so, yeah, it's a scary time to raise children right now.
Yeah, I was curious too. I wasn't planning on asking you this, but I ask a lot of the city candidates because there's a pilot here in Portland where they're banning phones for one of the high schools in Portland
Oh,
public
Big
schools.
grant. Yeah.
And I just feel like we were just talking about. I've always been like that should happen like statewide, like district. I know that'd take a lot more kind of political muscle, but I'm just curious. Is that kind of how you would feel like for mental health and
yeah.
distraction and all that stuff? And
I'd always err on the side of keeping children safe because when they experience trauma or abuse at an early age, it impacts the rest of their life. Their
Yeah.
ability to finish school, the drug-seeking behavior.
Mhm.
Trauma is very difficult for people to overcome. And so I probably always with children err on the side of caution and safety. I would just admit it's far beyond
Right, right.
my expertise or my background to say how a
Sure.
school should operate. But as a parent, I would love it if schools were a no cell phone zone,
Hmm.
unless for emergency calls or something like that, because it just eliminates that access. Yeah.
Yeah, and we talk about that especially for young girls. It's just
Yeah. I mean, that's what the data
it's
says.
critical. Yeah.
That all that Jonathan Haidt data, that he's a professor at Stern School of Business at NYU that wrote, I think, the book that kind of pushed everybody over to this cell phone banning position. And it's totally right on. It's
It's
eating
okay.
disorders.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's sexting. It's getting caught up in consumerism and YouTube videos and making their own YouTube
Right.
videos, making
Mm.
their own TikTok. I mean, it's
TikTok.
just
Yeah.
constant online, and it's for girls. It's particularly bad.
Has there been any pushback from Grant High School doing that? Is that
I don't
controversial
think
or?
I mean,
so.
I'll say
Maybe from
I
children.
work with somebody who has a I work with somebody who has a son there, and it just sounds like obviously all the kids do not like
Right.
it. They're finding all these workarounds and
Right.
stuff, and there is like occasionally I'll hear from adults that they don't like it, but yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting pilot. I know like outside of Oregon, there's entire districts that have banned them as well. Like I think somewhere in Washington D.C. or something, but yeah, I just always think it's super important for our youth. And I know this is kind of super aside, but I know Meta this week just had this new teen policy where they automatically make teenagers' accounts private, which I think is a
Mm,
good move. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Should have been
um,
done
yeah,
a lot.
should have been done a
Shouldn't
long
have
time
an
They
ago.
account.
just did that.
Actually, shouldn't
Yeah,
shouldn't have an account,
and
in
I
my
think
opinion. But yeah, I
it's
mean, come
after a
on.
lot of like congressional scrutiny and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, I was gonna move on to some of this deflection stuff. I just wanted, like, we talked about it last time a little bit, but you've been all over the state and kind
Mhm.
of
Yeah.
seen a lot of this implemented, I'd imagine, right?
Well, at least I'm following it and watching it and talking to local law enforcement about it. It's been interesting. I'm sure your listeners and your viewers are. I won't preach a sermon about what deflection is or all those things, but I think what is concerning to me about it is it's not the same in every county. So
Right.
you can go to one county and they're opting completely out of deflection, meaning if a person has methamphetamine or fentanyl, a user level, a possession level, that person just goes to jail or they just go through the court system. You can go to another county where they're doing deflection as I think it was intended to be, and that is where rather than going through the criminal justice system, they're sort of rerouted into sort of sobering centers, but more particularly treatment.
Mm.
And then you can come here to Multnomah County, and I'm not sure anybody can clearly define what's happening here. It's not happening yet, but essentially what it is I understand it is the police drive somebody who has a user level amount of illegal drugs. They take them to a center that they get a receipt or a slip that says they should go to treatment in the next 30 days, and then they're free to go, which is not likely to be effective and seems to be superficial at best. And so
Yeah.
I've never seen a lot. I can tell you, maybe somebody out there is listening can rebut me on this, and I'd be happy to learn about it. But I have never seen a law that a similarly situated person would be treated differently depending on every county that they're in. That
Mm.
so you could cross the county line. You could be 1 mile on this side and you go to jail. You go over the county line and you go to treatment. You go over here and you don't do anything at all. And that seems to me, that raises some questions about, in the law, if people are getting disparate treatment based on arbitrary geographical lines,
Mm.
about whether that's fair and ultimately constitutional.
Equal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't,
Yeah. I
I
was.
don't know. I mean, they're not protected classes as far as I know, unless, I mean, I don't know, but I don't think our deflection center is even open yet
it isn't.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say
Yeah.
I was shocked to learn
in Multnomah
yesterday,
County.
Yeah.
according to Eli Arnold, that a lot of what that deflection center is doing is just more like harm reduction stuff.
Yes.
So
And
Yeah.
it's not even open. That
yeah,
right now if he sees somebody engaged in public drug use, he calls what he called a peer support specialist from the county. That's the protocol. They get there, and that's it. That's the end of his job. And they'll say, "Do you want to go to treatment or jail?" The person says treatment. Eli turns around, and walks away. That's the end of his
Yeah.
encounter with these people.
Yeah.
So there's no,
and it's
I mean,
you hear
they
that
can just
word.
say peace out. I don't.
Yeah, I was gonna say you hear that word continuum of care a lot, and that's not really a continuum. That's just a broken
Yep.
loop or something. I don't know what you call that, but
But, if you just go over the county line to Clackamas
Yeah,
County,
right.
mhm.
they're
Totally different.
they're doing their best to do something that's real, that's actually going to make a difference, and
Yeah.
it probably will. I
So
think
is
it's well led.
Washington.
So is
Yeah.
Washington County. So there is some good coming out of it. It just doesn't feel fair that some counties are going to be successful and some
Yeah,
aren't. It should be uniform.
yeah,
That's
you
what I
have
think.
this
Yes, it should.
uneven kind of
Yeah.
application.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good law is uniform. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Um, and kind of in that line, I think I saw you went to the Chinese Garden, which we hear a lot from here in Portland. Just like I was trying to remember the last thing they put a fence around it, right?
Yes. Yeah.
They've just had a lot of issues in that area of town, obviously. But I was just curious, like what you took away from that, what they were telling you, and
Embarrassingly, I had never been to the Chinese Garden before. I've been around there many, many
yeah,
times, but never actually gone in.
It's beautiful.
I had no idea how beautiful it
Yeah,
was.
it
isn't
is.
it
Yeah, once you
amazing?
get inside the walls,
It's like I'd walked right out
It's
of
like a sanctuary or something.
Old Town into this Garden of Eden of
Yeah.
sorts. So I thought it was really great. I had a good conversation with leaders there. They are concerned, as you would already know, they're very concerned about crime, and it feels like the crime is being in so many ethnic communities that I talk to in Portland, and the Chinese Americans, Borgans are just one of them. So many communities feel like the crime and the homelessness and the dysfunction is pushed into their neighborhoods.
mm,
It's
It
it's
is.
swept out of the business areas, or swept out of the more wealthy neighborhoods, and ends up going into immigrant neighborhoods or different other communities. And so they're pretty uniformly frustrated by the lack of accountability for
Yeah.
um, what's ultimately lawlessness and violence.
yeah,
Mhm.
especially because I just feel like historically, Old Town, Chinatowns has always been like that. Like they
Yes.
just have been fighting against this stuff for like decades, and especially I feel like now it's like kind of a critical mass, component. I'm sure like Jesse Burke would agree with that too. But yeah, I was just glad to see you go there and listen to those folks.
It was a great conversation.
Yeah.
I learned a lot, and also got to have the conversation in this beautiful garden, which was a good
Yeah,
a
it is
good
nice.
a
And you
good day
get
for me.
some good tea in
Got
there
some
and
tea.
stuff. Yeah, yeah.
It was great.
um, okay, I was gonna move on to this DMV stuff.
Yeah.
There was just a lot of conversation in the past few weeks about, and I'll kind of sum it up, I guess. I believe it was Nigel at Willamette Week. Somebody at Willamette Week broke this story about the DMV had accidentally registered about 300 people to vote, and like two or three of those ended up actually voting. These were non-citizens, and there's just a lot of conversation about this. And I know Dan Rayfield, your opponent, put out a statement about it saying, "I'm going to get to the bottom of this," something like that. I'm paraphrasing,
Yeah.
but I didn't really enjoy that statement. I don't know, because I just felt like he has kind of helped create a environment that created this
Yeah.
problem. But I was curious, like your take on his statement and just the whole situation. And
Well, I think the statement is an admission of guilt. I mean, like you got to make that statement. You got to make it quickly because you voted or you sponsored some of the bills that led to this problem in the first place. It goes back to 2015. In 2015, that we had what was like the motor voter law, which sort of automatically enrolls everybody who gets a driver's license in Oregon in the same year. So there wasn't distance between it. I believe, if I'm right, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe in the same year that there was also a bill passed that my opponent voted for both of these bills, where uh, non-citizen residents could get driver's license. So it's 1 + 1 =
right.
2, right? If you're going to enroll everybody and you're going to give non-residents or non-citizens driver's license, then there should be some sort of check and there should be some sort of system to prevent the thing that everybody would think would happen, is that people
Yeah.
that shouldn't be able to vote would be registered to vote. But in 2021, to make matters worse, he also voted for a bill that really prevented county clerks and the Secretary of State from cleaning up old voter rolls,
Hmm.
where people that hadn't been in the state or voted for a really long time.
And I hear from people a lot about that Oregon should do that. And I don't know why they don't, but
I think it kind of it this is a small issue. We're talking about 300 voters.
yeah.
It's probably more, but 300 voters and maybe a handful of those people actually voted. And so there's probably people on the right side would say this is voter integrity, the elections are not fair, and they'd say all those things. I don't think that's the reality of this. I think it's just another thing where there seems to be a detached government that's very focused on optics and not really focused on good governance or substance,
Mm.
not focused on serving what the people actually need, but doing something that looks good or captures some sort of headline. So one thing we didn't talk about at the beginning, you'd asked what are the top 3 issues.
Mhm.
One thing I left out, and I feel like a fool for doing it, because I think it's corruption. It's soft corruption. People are really concerned about the way the government's spending the
Mm-hmm.
money in Oregon, and really concerned about how people are using their office. And I don't think it's a partisan thing, Republicans or Democrats. I think everybody kind of has the sense that there's a lot of money going around, and it's not making any difference.
Mm-hmm.
There's when those accounts are audited, there's 5 million missing here, or 10 million missing here, or
Yeah.
unaccounted for, and nothing ever seems to be done by that. And so like we could go on. Wasn't it also the DMV that had this massive data breach where
Yeah, they did.
it's
Yeah.
just
Basically, if you have a driver's license, you have a high likelihood that your data was breached.
when your government is doing really well, when something like this happens, it's the story of the year, because people would never expect a government to
I feel like that happens at the
fail.
city of Portland all the time. Like
But
there's a
Yeah.
phishing scam. There's
it,
Mhm.
it happens on a bi-weekly basis in Oregon,
yeah,
to the
it's
point where
almost
we
not
can't even
news.
remember the last
No,
scandal,
that's right. It's
because
like fatigue about
yeah.
phishing scams and
When I was just gonna say, one of the things about the DMV thing that kind of bugged me was that, first of all, I think the Oregonian or somebody published this thing that they only found out about this because a think tank pressured them to like look into
To look
it.
into it.
Which to me means like,
pressured
yeah,
who to look into it,
well, the
you
state
know?
or the DMV or somebody to request that
Okay.
information, I guess. Which also to me it means like this could be a bigger problem. But the other thing that bugs me was I think the DMV or whatever state body regulates them said this was basically just somebody like on the computer hit the wrong key and they went into this voter registration. And I'm just like, well, that doesn't sound very smart or, safe. I have a long history of like not trusting technology in our state government. And this just seems like
Yeah. Remember
another
Oregon?
page, another
Another
page
place
in
for
that
that.
book.
And it all comes back to leadership, right? When there's so many, if there's one failure that can happen to anybody, or two that can happen to anybody, but when you have these just consistent failures across the boards in the state agencies, at the state level, the county level, and in the local level in government, you're just seeing flippant leadership, tone deaf leadership, or just people who weren't qualified to do the job in the first place.
Yeah.
And it bleeds down, because
Mm-hmm.
it comes down.
Yeah, and the only thing I was gonna say too was like I mentioned Dan's statement because I was just gonna say like if you don't, I'm in this class of people that if you think the past 10 years were like good for Oregon and we've had a good time, I don't think most people think that way, but I just see him as a part of that, and I'm sure he's a nice guy and everything, but he's been in the state legislature for a long time, and I just I feel like most people want to change.
Yeah, Dan is a
Yeah.
nice guy, but and I've been able to kind of have discussions with him 2 or 3 times in the last few weeks. But he's in a rock and in a hard place because one is law enforcement. This is a law enforcement position I'm running for, and he doesn't have any experience. And so when we have discussions about law enforcement, he's not even able to use the right terminology. He doesn't really understand how it works. But the bigger issue for him is when we have discussions is like he's forced to gaslight on every issue because if you name it in Oregon, we're bad at it. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
I'm not saying
That's not wrong.
by measurable data compared to other states. If you talk about public education, mental health, healthcare, uh, addiction, homelessness,
Yeah.
crime, economy, go down the list. If there's one or two things we're good at, maybe somebody could tell me, but we're almost bad at every single thing. So if you're an incumbent and you've been voting for the last 10 years and you're going and bragging about I passed this CHIPS bill and I recriminalized drugs, what it all feels like is that it's a gaslighting. Like I did a lot of good things and I don't know why Oregon is so bad. It's probably not my
Right,
fault. And
right.
that's a hard
Mm.
position to be in.
Yeah, it is. It is kind of, I don't know, funny to hear those kind of like check boxes because I do feel everyone I talk to is just like, this has not been a great, past few years for the state and especially up here in Portland. But
Yeah.
The polls, sorry to cut you off, but the polls say that, more Oregonians are dissatisfied with the direction of Oregon than are excited by the future. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we are a pessimistic state right now, but the poll that I read really recently that kind of surprised me is that young Oregon voters are now feeling that way. The
Mm-hmm.
people that are in their 20s and 30s in Oregon feel like the state is headed in, the majority of them feel like the state is headed in the right direction. And off the top of my head, I want to say like 27% thought it was going in the right direction and more than 50% thought it was going in the wrong direction. So
Mhm.
even the youth of Oregon are sensing that they don't have anything to compare it against. And
Right,
we all
right.
we all know what Portland was in 2010. It was a much different city than it
Yeah.
is today. We know what it could be, but I think even people that don't have that reference are frustrated with the direction of the
That is
state.
interesting. Yeah, the young people just, it's just kind of a self-fulfilling
Maybe.
prophecy of like, I'm not, I don't have any faith in the future of the state kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
That's not good.
Yeah. Let's see here. I was gonna ask you about you recently were with a group, and I didn't write the name down here, but it was a human trafficking group,
Yeah.
and talking to.
Safety Compass.
Okay, yeah,
So let me give them a plug.
yeah,
Safety Compass does human trafficking intervention and survivor work. They do Clackamas County. They do some in Multnomah County, a lot in Washington County and Marion County, and possibly Yamhill County. So really, the Portland Metro and the Salem Metro is their focus group. They wanted to meet with me. My background is, for your viewers or listeners, my background is pretty strong. Human trafficking. I did human
yeah.
trafficking
I
cases
would
in
say go
Oregon.
check out the first episode with Will
Yeah.
too and learn more about it. But yeah, you can keep
Yeah, so
going.
so now in the state and internationally, I've done quite a bit of work to combat human trafficking, and so we had a conversation, and it was a good conversation. But what they're really frustrated by is if you don't already know this, whenever you have high levels of drug trafficking or high prevalence of drug trafficking, you also have a lot of human trafficking and you also have organized retail theft. People think about those things as three different things, but it's all the same.
Mm.
So when people are addicted, they're vulnerable, and when they're vulnerable, they're exploited. And just like when you set up a gas station, they'll sell you gas, and then they'll have a convenience store, and they'll also sell you oil, because once you sort of have somebody on the line, you try to get as much money as you possibly can. So the organized retail theft is definitely attached to the drug cartel.
Mm-hmm.
Human trafficking is definitely attached to the drug cartel.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really frustrated because it seems like everything that Oregon does to deal with these problems is at the grassroots level where there aren't resources or
What are we
manpower.
doing? Do you even know? I don't know what we're doing.
I think Multnomah County is really struggling. I think we saw a
Yeah.
17% increase in human trafficking in Multnomah County last year, which is not surprising
No,
because
it's not surprising.
the drug trade has also been increasing, and fentanyl overdoses and all of that. So they were just concerned because I don't want to speak for them. They were just concerned because they feel like they're this tiny group of people working really, really hard to take on this monster, and the state had at the statewide level, they have no resources. The Attorney General's office has really one full-time position working on human trafficking.
One person?
And that person's not an investigator. She's great, but it's not an investigator. It's not a lawyer. It's not somebody with global expertise. It's just a person who collects data and does grant management.
Mm.
And so we've put no resources and no attention to human trafficking. It's exploding everywhere, in a lot of different forms, and people are suffering and they're being exploited. So if you're working on the front lines of that, it's just hard to see so much tax money and so much money flying around Oregon, but us putting zero towards getting people out of what amounts to what is called by the ILO as modern day slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it reminds me of, like, I don't know, just maybe it's the way you just said it, but of our homeless problem here in Multnomah County, where we keep putting more money into it, but our homeless numbers just keep going
You keep going up.
up, and it's like, what is happening here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was also going to get an update, if as much you want to say about it. Have you noticed any shift or change in the fentanyl kind of trade up here, or just in the state in general?
You know, I'm probably not in the weeds enough to be able to speak to it like somebody who's doing frontline law enforcement. Like any drug, it's a market, it's a business, right? So people are constantly trying to find ways to market it, repackage it, or get it to users so they use more of it or continue to be addicted, and also sort of skirting law enforcement or efforts to. So it's going to always be progressing, of adapting and changing over time. I was just talking with Kristen about this before we started, but when I first knew about fentanyl would be about 2005, cases where people were sneaking into hospital dumpsters and taking fentanyl patches, these like slow release patches, and syringing out the fentanyl and injecting them and killing themselves because it's so potent and so powerful. And that's what we knew as fentanyl was the patch,
Yeah.
20 years ago. Then it's powder, and it's pill, and now they're injecting it. So, and they mix it with what was this trank,
Yeah.
and it lace it in or label it as
For
Oxycontin.
people who don't know, can you talk about what trank is?
Well, trank, I think trank is an over the counter drug, right? That it's I don't know a lot about it, but it's basically a blend with fentanyl that am I wrong to say that eventually it starts kind of eating your flesh,
No, that's right.
where you inject it, and I'm not quite sure why that makes it more marketable. Maybe it has a different high or a
More
different
potent or
effect.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is good to
but I
make
don't
me
know.
sound bad, but I I joke about it sometimes because I always just say like, "Hey, we got the best trank in Portland. Come on down." But I believe, yeah, it's a like a horse or like an elephant tranquilizer, I
Yeah,
think is that's where the name comes from. But that would be my guess, is yeah, theoretically, if you cut it with that, it increases the high or something like
yeah.
that. Which is crazy because fentanyl is
Right.
super potent already. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to tell from even what we were talking about with Eli yesterday. It just seems like they're trying to bust dealers more, and that, according to what he was saying, that they've kind of shifted where they're doing business and that type of thing. But it's just this ongoing.
It's kind of like a whack-a-mole.
It
So,
is.
when you have your local law enforcement are really, really important, Portland Police, the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, Clackamas, all these things, when they're trying to deal with it on their own, it just moves around,
Yeah.
can move out of their jurisdiction, move to another neighborhood. That's why we have to have this statewide approach. That's why by statute, the Attorney General is supposed to run point on all drug trafficking, because it's the one point where you can trace it wherever it goes in the state, whether they move here or here or here, you're tracking them from the highest level focal point and not from the ground up. And you can also connect with the federal government and make sure that you're tracking the
Right.
supply chain as it comes in, so you can really attack the supply chain on the outside of the state before it gets here in the first place. We're doing this sort of bottom up approach, and it's difficult to get the heavy hitting drug traffickers doing that, and it's very difficult to avoid the whack-a-mole, which is what's happening with homelessness, and it's also happening in the drug trade. Is we put pressure on this neighborhood, it moves over here. We put
Right.
pressure on this neighborhood, it moves over here. And that's that's a core plan of mine as Attorney General, is to start attacking things from the top, so that there's really nowhere to run or hide in our state.
How
Our
will
eyes
you
are
do
on you.
that?
Yeah, one of the ways is just connecting. So law enforcement over the last 10 years has just completely disintegrated and disconnected from the Attorney General's office. They're all working on their own. And I've gotten a lot of support from law enforcement leaders across the state And you can't just get law enforcement leaders just in the Portland metro area, because somebody could be in Yamhill County and drive the drugs into Portland. Like,
Right.
you have to have this umbrella over the state. Build a strategy, start sharing information again, and then push the resources from the state level down to the ground. We also need to plug back into something that's called HIDA. HIDA is a federal program that tracks drug trafficking data globally. So it tells us where it's like, from seed to tree
Hmm.
to truck to plane, like how the whole thing works and where it comes from, so we can start driving that back. That used to be housed in our Department of Justice. They left in the last 4 years because there's just been this disintegration of relationship in the Department of Justice with federal law enforcement agencies, DEA, FBI, Interpol. So I want to rebuild those relationships, run the organized crime division like an air traffic control, where everybody's sort of plugging into and working together. That's largely what I was doing in West Africa, was just bringing different governments, the U.S. State Department, UNICEF, the German government, bringing these people together, sharing resources, getting on the same page, and being able to actually track the problem across national lines. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. I was thinking it does seem like a smart kind of law enforcement agenda to be like, because you keep mentioning organized retail theft, which is funny because I hear about it all the time from people my age who just complain about, I go to Fred Meyer and everything's locked up, and there doesn't seem to like make this connection between what's actually happening and why the stores do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, if you have this agenda of tackling that to kind of break this continuum of crime, with fentanyl and all that other stuff. And also, I think you mentioned last time you would have some, as Attorney General, you would have some agency over OSP, right?
Yeah, I
Is that
mean, by statute, there's instances where the Attorney General can call on Oregon State Police to do different investigations or deliver subpoenas and
tasks
things.
or whatever? Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
there's a mechanism to do that.
okay,
Yeah, with organized retail theft, if I can just kind of put a
yeah,
fine
yeah,
point on
mhm,
that,
yeah.
you have what becomes really difficult in human trafficking the same way. When I used to prosecute those cases, there would be it's almost like a carnival came through town. So they would advertise, we're going to be at this hotel, and by the time it takes a long time to investigate and build a case that you can actually arrest and prosecute and,
Right.
and get search warrants and all of these sorts of things. And by the time you were able to do that, they had already moved to the next county and the next town and the next county and the next town. And so it was really hard for law enforcement at the ground level to be able to stay in front of that train. And in organized retail theft, this happening like that now. Like, you hit the Walmart in Woodburn on I-5, and you can be to the Walmarts in another county in 30 minutes. And so by the time the police are following up here, you're hitting this and hitting this
In these
and
different
in your
jurisdictions.
jurisdictions.
Yeah.
And with Senate Bill 48, when they do finally arrest somebody, they usually are uh, booked, released. That's the catch and release bill. So they're booked and released, and they're back on the road doing the same thing again, even crossing into another state. So in order to proactively investigate those cases, you have to have somebody that's watching the train, the carnival or the train as it goes around, and can intercede where they're going to go next.
So
Rather,
you're not siloed to one county.
yes,
You can kind of
exactly. Not just
monitor.
on this like chase and the that criminal operation is capitalizing on disorganization.
Mm.
And it's not law enforcement's fault. It really comes down to the Attorney General's office. It's
Yeah, I actually never thought about that. Yeah, if you have the ability to just go to county to county and you can just hit all these stores.
in one day, and
Yeah,
and then go park in another county and be completely
yeah.
um,
Because if you just look at, I don't know, I'm just thinking, if you think about like one store, you're like, oh, I stole $500 worth of stuff. But if you add all that up,
yep, over the course of a day. It can be a
right?
lot.
Yeah.
So are you saying that if you do this program from the top down and everybody's communicating, then it's easier to stay on top of these people?
And even know where they're going next, and knowing their method of operation, and intercept it,
Okay.
as they go,
This is like an information sharing
yeah, and,
plan.
and having investigators that are just charged to doing that. Who's
Mm-hmm.
doing this? Where's their home base? How are they operating? And then collecting all those cases. So it's $500 in Woodburn, it's $500 in Clackamas County, it's $500 in Portland. But together, it's one criminal operation that equals this many dollars, and that makes it a theft one, or that makes it a higher
Mm-hmm.
charge. And so you can actually potentially hold them on that charge in custody, and get a reasonable sentence that's likely to deter future actions.
Mm.
Otherwise, what happens is Marion County has a $500 theft. Clackamas County has a $500 theft. That's not taken seriously. It's not
Right.
there's no
Right.
significant punishment.
It's like
If you put it all together, then if it's interstate, it goes to
The
the U.S.
feds,
Attorney's Office.
yes,
Yeah.
hmm, it becomes a felony basically at that point.
yeah,
Yeah.
Well, it's federal. It's
Yeah.
real different.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's not go to Inverness and get released. It's different.
Yeah. Well, I was curious too.
Like everything here.
I was gonna ask you, like, would that be also a similar approach of, because I think all three of us post or just agree that like this catch and release thing, I don't know. In Multnomah County, it's certainly bad, but and hopefully Nathan will change that when he gets into office. But
I don't know. A lot of that's county stuff. That a lot of that's it's what Nicole Busher talked about, the head of the corrections union. It's like
yeah,
there's no jail beds. I mean, there's nowhere to put these people,
right,
and
right.
even if we wanted to.
Yeah, I was just curious, like, would that be a similar approach to like changing how we deal with that in Oregon? Because it just seems like it happens so much, and maybe it is just Multnomah County, but
I
I don't
don't think
know.
it's just Multnomah County, but I think Washington and Clackamas seem to do a better job.
Yeah. The ones that really struggle, that to my knowledge, the ones that really struggle with bed space are Multnomah County, Marion County,
Yeah.
and Benton County, which is
Hmm.
Corvallis, and
Okay.
maybe to some degree Lane. But those are the big three that I'm aware of. And some of it has to do with the decisions that the local voters make and how much they want to fund the size of jails.
Yeah.
So,
Right. Nobody wants to do that. And according to Nicole, our county doesn't want to do it. And so she said, and you can
Every
see
year
this
they're
ideological divide. Yeah, they just cut the sheriff's budget. They cut the corrections budget. They're
that's
just cutting,
crazy.
cutting. And
That's crazy.
she said they think if this is the majority. I mean, there are a couple people, I think Sharon Meyer and Julie Brim Edwards would disagree with this, but the majority right now of Multnomah County thinks if we cut jail beds, it will reduce crime. I mean, it's just, I don't understand it, but
yeah. It has
Hasn't.
it's an
yeah.
ideological problem.
It
Yeah,
seems
no,
like
it
yeah,
hasn't.
it seems like yeah, we've thoroughly tried that up here in Multnomah County and it hasn't worked. And
I think it all comes out of a similar philosophy with decriminalization of drugs
Right.
with Measure 110. There's probably a list of 3 or 4 things that go under that. And these were theories.
Yeah.
I've heard of these theories when I first started prosecuting. They never really got wings, never got legs or life until around 2020. And then a lot of these
Right.
things in Oregon started to. But they're theories that have never really been tested. They've never really been successful, at least in the United States, in our culture, within our legal system and our government. And what's been frustrating to me is that it's one thing to say we're going to try something new. It's another thing to see that thing is failing, that people are suffering, that people are fleeing your city, and not have the humility as leadership to say,
Yeah.
you know what? We're going back to the drawing board. This doesn't work. We're not going to
yeah,
let this happen. It seems to be, and this deflection center issue really seems to be a doubling down to me
I
of
know.
saying we're
It
right. We're
is.
going to keep doing this. And meanwhile, this isn't funny money. These are human lives. You know that.
Yeah, people are dying.
It's hard to find some person that doesn't have a relative or a
Yes.
family member who has died or become addicted to fentanyl. It's crushing our families. It's overwhelming every institution, and people are still just clinging to the idea that maybe if they hold out longer, that they'll have been right all along, and
right,
they won't
right.
have to admit that they were wrong. And their pride and their ego seems to be bigger than the dysfunction and the suffering that's all around them. And to me, that is unacceptable. It's not unacceptable to take a chance and try to do something different. It's unacceptable to not admit you're wrong and change it.
What do you say to the argument that, I mean, their argument is, hey, this deflection or drug court or some kind of intervention at the criminal justice level doesn't work because people have to be able to voluntarily seek treatment, and only then can that really stick. I mean, what do you say to that?
It's not been my experience, and it's not been supported by any of the data I've seen. A lot of what the attack on drug courts usually had to do with people that were using marijuana that went into the drug court. So they
Sure.
were like conflating that with methamphetamine and fentanyl and those sorts of things. I worked in treatment courts. I worked in the mental health court for a few years, which is a similar thing. If somebody has mental health problems, rather than putting
Right.
them into jail, you put them into it was overwhelmingly successful. I
Mhm.
saw lots and lots of success in drug court. It just takes time, because what you have is in a drug court, somebody shows up, they don't go to jail, they get admission to treatment, they get support like community support, they get jobs, they get housing, they get set up for success, and they relapse and they fail, and they fail drug tests, and they spend a night in jail or something like that, or they have to do community service as a punishment for their failure, but then they're put back in, and it goes on like that forever, and it's very successful because it's well-rounded, it's 360. Without that stick, without that carrot, most people that I've ever talked to that have kicked hard drugs will say that it was the threat of going to jail, or I was in jail, or I was worried about, like, there has to be some sort of push to get people into actual treatment. It is
Mm-hmm.
not true. It is a fiction that somebody sits on the street, foaming at the mouth against a wall in downtown Portland, high on fentanyl, and they get off their high and they're like, you know what? Today's the day. I'm going to
Right.
catch the city bus and
Right.
go get clean. Their dealer won't let them if they wanted to.
Right.
And as soon as they got out, their dealer would be
Yeah.
trying to sell to them again. But when in the drug court environment, the dealer sort of has to pierce this criminal justice system that's sort of protecting somebody and guiding them as they're going through the system. And so when people say that was a failure, I would say take a picture right now and take a picture in 2019, and which is better? Are we better for all the great changes and all the philosophical revolution that we've had? Are we better now, or were we better in 2019? Are we better now, or were we better in 2010? And obviously the data and the eyeball test is that we have made things objectively much, much worse by trying to change them. And so there has to be some sort of admission of failure and a willingness to do things that are known to be effective.
Well, and
Yeah.
I guess even if that fiction were true, they can't get treatment in Multnomah County
It's not
because
there.
they're full all the time. I mean, they'd have to stand in line. And even if they get to the front of the line, they may not get in. They probably won't.
It makes me furious
Yeah.
that is true. Like,
I know.
how can that be true? How can we set up a new philosophy, a new paradigm for how we deal with drug addiction, and not even have the facilities,
Yeah.
whether that's true, whether that paradigm even works or not, have the facilities to make that paradigm work? That's just unacceptable at every level. That's unacceptable.
It seems like, yeah, like the state, I mean, maybe the governor's what I'm thinking of, but it seems like everyone's kind of just now like, hey, we're going to create these grand like centers and stuff, but it's coming out like 5 years from now. But I'm just like, what have we been doing for the past 8 years or whatever, like just sitting on our hands. And I hear that it's funny because you bring up the carrot and stick thing, and I hear that a lot from Portland candidates. But I feel like they say that, but they don't have the stick part. Like they just don't.
What do you mean?
Like, or the carrot part. I don't know. It's just like they love to use that phrase, but then it comes back to, oh, we're just gonna let these people go to treatment when they're ready. I'm like, that's not a carrot and stick approach.
Yeah.
At least to me. I don't
No,
know.
it's not. I don't.
Yeah.
But I know you talk about all the time how our state laws are really prohibitive of people being forced into treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's no right. I mean, yes, the focus is on the individual liberty of the drug user.
Right.
In my
Involuntary
opinion.
commitment type.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we just don't have that standard for danger to self and others is.
But it did
I mean,
work.
you practically have to have a gun to your
It
head.
did work with these drug courts, it sounds like, when we had.
Obama funded drug courts because they work. In my opinion, they work.
They worked. And when I was a prosecutor in Yamhill County and then Marion County, and then I went to work at the national level for the National District Attorneys Association doing capacity building across the country for law enforcement. And the reason they were recruiting and hiring people from Oregon, if you're good in Oregon, we were more advanced than the other
We were because
states.
we had drug court. We started drug court relatively early.
Victims' rights, victim protection, the way we looked at domestic violence, the way we looked at sexual assault and date rape, and the way we saw victims and the way we saw addiction was
Yeah.
decades in front of every other state. So I was shocked to come back and
I know.
have our criminal justice system just like burnt to the ground like it was the worst. When we were, a decade ago, we were sort of a model state for the rest of the country. And so drug courts were part of that. Were they perfect? No, but they were brand new. And so it would have been better to invest in making them better. It would have been better to invest in building dynamics into those rather than to say, we're going to do harm reduction and
Right.
God bless you and good luck with your addiction. That's not working.
Yeah.
And here's some needles so you don't get HIV, but you're probably going to overdose from this
Yeah,
and die
that's
from
the
this tomorrow.
only focus is HIV. It's so weird with a drug
It,
where one granule can kill you. It's just so weird to me.
it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and it seems like the worst possible timing to engage or roll that stuff out with fentanyl. Just
at the
exploding.
same
It's
time.
like that's just a disastrous
Yeah.
recipe.
Definitely true that magnified the decision making, was that fentanyl is so addictive and so
Yeah.
dangerous and so new. I mean, new on the street, I should say.
And you basically, I would characterize it this way, are enabling those people at that point of just, hey, keep doing fentanyl and
Well, I don't
Yeah.
hopefully
understand. Julia Brim Edwards asked when they presented, these harm reduction advocates were presenting on the budget that wanted money, and the budget got passed at Multnomah County. What is it, $5 billion with a B dollars? There's nothing in it. There's nothing in it about improving access to rehab, treatment, getting off of drugs. There's
Wow.
nothing in it. There was nothing in the DA's budget. I mean, I've never seen it. There's nothing about the recriminalization of drugs. No one in Multnomah County was preparing for this. And they were funding what, five, I'm trying to remember. I talked about it on Twitter. It was millions of needles. That was
Yeah.
the majority of the money, or at
Why,
least
why
a
do you
lot
think
of
that
it.
is? Like, doesn't treatment seem to be the thing that 100% of everybody should say?
Well, I was going to ask you, like, do you
She asked
chalk
them
that
about
up
it.
to JVP and just
Yes, I think it's an
setting the
ideological
agenda?
divide.
Yeah.
Well, right. So in Multnomah County, I don't, yeah, that's part of it. But as Sharon Myron says, their budget too is also just a copy and paste job. That thing is the size of a phone book. Nobody could get through it. I mean, it's enormous, and they cut and paste it every year, is what she said, and then they just plop it all in front of everybody, and everybody votes it in.
Okay.
And when they were doing public hearings on the budget, Julia Brim Edwards asked, "I see all this funding of needles. Where is the access to getting off of drugs? Where is
Right.
that in
Right.
here?" And they said, "Well, the focus here is on preventing harm reduction, is about preventing disease." And she said, "I get it. And it's somewhere in a continuum of care. And I think we should prevent disease, but I'd like to see an exit ramp for these people.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that at some point?"
Treatment options. Yeah.
I mean, and there's no response. It's just like talking to the terracotta army or something. There's just a blank face. And then, so that's happening, I think, at the county level. And then at the DA level, I mean, that was different. And now
Yeah.
Nathan Vasquez will take office in
That'll change.
January. Yeah, it will. I think it will change. But there was nothing in that budget to prepare for the recriminalization of drugs. And so Multnomah County is just a weird animal. But
Yeah. Well, it's exactly the way I think about it is exactly what you were saying earlier of, and I love talking to people who come here on my show of like who are willing to change their mind, because that's how I see our county leader is. She's dug her heels in. She's not changing her mind.
yeah.
It's this harm reduction stuff because it's going to pay off, like you're saying, that if you just keep working at it.
Like servant
But
leadership.
leaders
Yeah.
don't do that, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Well, not enough anyway. So servant leadership is really, you're taking the position, you're holding the position on behalf of the people to try to do something better. Like arrogant leadership is, I want this position, I want the title, I want control, I want power over this thing. And whenever you have to admit that you were wrong, or it's like it's a threat to you and your ego
Right.
and your arrogance, and it's exposed. In good times, everybody looks like a servant leader. When things are hard, it exposes a lot about people. And that's why I've been surprised, even at my own opponent, is I consistently speak with him, and there's no apology for, hey, Oregon's in a rough spot right now. Economically, law and order, by the data, Oregon is in a really rough spot. We're sorry, I'm fixing it, I'm working on it, we're going to learn from this. It's great.
So-
I passed this.
Right.
Everything's okay. You must be
Everything's
crazy.
doing great. Yeah.
And that to me is like either fear, I'm scared to admit what's true, or I'm not really here for you. I'm here for my own.
Yeah, or maybe he's not actually talking to people. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because that's all I hear about, and I'm sure it's all you hear about too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what a lot of people say is, well, we can't just throw addicts in jail. We can't just throw addicts in jail. Okay, but where is the compelling off ramp for them? And they're
Yes.
right. I mean, we shouldn't get to that point, but most cities don't look like Portland.
Yes.
Most cities don't have bodies all over the sidewalk. Most cities haven't let themselves get to where we are.
Yep. Yes. It's a crisis. We're in the
Yeah.
middle. We're in the middle of a crisis.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to talk about before I get into these funny?
I'm excited for him.
This first one's kind
I
of.
mean, Will might have something.
Am I the only?
Yeah.
Am I the only one that answers, or everybody has to?
No,
answer
you
it?
might have something else to talk about.
Oh, no,
before
no, no.
we-
Yeah, is there anything that you
no.
want to
Get
bring
to
up
that.
before you?
No, I think we've covered a lot. I just want to always just remind people that the Attorney General is the anti-corruption wing of the government, and it's also the child protection. It has a child protection division. It's a child protection division of the government. And what I believe we need a lot more of is accountability with spending and accountability with misuse of office. People need to get in trouble for those things because we've got this soft corruption thing growing.
Mm-hmm.
And it really takes somebody with a nonpartisan, non-political background. What has been hard for the current Department of Justice is that it's difficult when you're so deeply embedded in your party to hold somebody accountable when they step out of line. And I don't have that. I am running as a Republican, but I don't have a political background and I don't owe anybody political favors. So I just wanted to put that
Yeah.
plug in at the end.
When
It's
you
important right now.
and
Yeah.
you just reminded me, yeah, that I do think it's kind of I never like it when a bunch of out-of-state money comes to support a candidate, and you know exactly what I'm talking about.
You
But
know,
yeah, Dan's got a lot of like New York money, and I don't know from some of these.
I'll just for some levity, I'll say that I've outraised Dan pretty significantly in state, just by sheer number of donors, not by the size of the donations. And so he's gotten a lot of money from out of state, meaning he's gone to law firms and basically law firms that do business with the state of Oregon and has sort of sold the
Mm.
position to win the election. So that's okay. He hasn't broken any law. In a lot of other states, what he's done it would be illegal, but in our state, it's not illegal.
Of course, it's not.
It's quite
Not, I was
it's
saying
quite
not
Nothing's
yet.
illegal here.
as an attorney, like in the conflict of interest, like somebody that you could be hiring to do your business in you're exchanging money before you even have that position seems unethical. But the reality is, I have heard so many times that Will, you're a newcomer, you're a Republican, you can't win. The Democrats always win. And I want to ask them if he's so sure he's going to win, why does he need to go fly to New York and start taking all of this dark money? And I think it's just a realization that there's a movement starting. There are people that are frustrated. They're looking for centrist, non-politically affiliated candidates that can actually fix problems or are dedicated to fixing problems. And so he's trying to bring in that same outside influence that Mike Schmidt brought in that got him into
Yeah,
power,
yeah.
and others have as well. And we'll see if it works. But I, at the end of the day, want my hands to be clean and not do anything that's going to be unethical or illegal in another state.
What do you say though to people? I mean, I can see people watching this and saying, well, okay, but you are affiliated.
Yeah.
And I can see people in the metro area thinking, you're Republican, and I can hear them saying, my issue is with the national party and with Trump.
Yeah.
And so how do I reconcile that? And sort of having this, it's almost, I
Yeah.
think for a lot of people in the metro area, like some kind of moral quandary about
Yes.
voting for a Republican just because of Trump.
And
Yes.
and I know you had some posts about like a lot of people maybe in this area of like this is the first time I'm gonna vote for a Republican
Yeah.
because you're trying to, like you said, be kind of a moderate.
When I made
for-
this decision, I wrote myself my own thesis. Like, what are you doing and why are you going to do this? It was not an easy decision for me to do this. It's
Yeah.
not something that I had ever had in my game plan. And I almost had to talk myself into doing it. And in that thesis was, so I grew up in an Oregonian time in Oregon where Mark Hatfield, the Hatfield
Right.
Republican, was a very different kind of Republican.
Yes.
The National Republican Party and the Hatfield Republican Party wouldn't seem like the same party
That's
anymore.
right.
That's how
Right.
much it's changed. And so I thought when I'm coming back to this, I want to, and we even use it in our literature, it's never changed. Like, I want to represent not just me, I want to be a part of a group of people that represent a dawn of new leadership in Oregon that are going to redefine the way parties, both Republican and Democrats, engage with each other and put forth policy. I'm not for all Republican candidates, hell or high water. I'm for Republican parties or Republican candidates who see a different vision of what Oregon can be and are dedicated to serving people. Maybe have some difference of ideas with Democrats. And it's the same thing with Democrat candidates. I think there's room for both parties for new things and new ideas because this current division and sort of hatred and vitriol to one another has created this general arrogance that is difficult to get any business done in. And so when people ask me about the current Republican Party, like, I say it in all my literature, so if you don't believe it's true, I say I don't want to be a part of something old. I want to be a part of something new. I want to be on the wave of a new leadership that we're going to be proud of. We're going to say a Republican in Oregon means this. A Democrat in Oregon means this.
Yeah,
And we're proud of it. Like we want the rest of the country to start following the way we engage in business and we share ideas.
I think that's really smart because I don't know, maybe it's just me and you, Kristen, but I do hear from people who they they're fed. They're referred to a lot as politically homeless, but people are fed
Mm-hmm.
up with both parties and just the party system. So I think that's a really kind of smart approach to it.
Mm-hmm.
At
It's
least from what people, I hear
it's
from people.
genuine. It just is a genuine thing.
Yeah,
I'm not looking to carry somebody else's torch.
yeah. Okay, this might seem like this is coming out of nowhere, but I heard, I think it was one of these articles I read, but you used to be in a band.
Is that true?
Yeah, that Zane, that dirty dog.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Was that when you had the mustache? Because I liked your photo with the
It,
mustache.
That's
well,
good journalism.
that is, yeah.
Good job, Zane.
I was in a band, and yes, there was mustaches involved, fake and real.
Oh, okay. So that's like a character thing or something?
Yeah,
Or-
I really love music. I really love making music.
What do you like?
I like
what
creating,
do you
like what
Like
music.
what genre or genres or bands or what are you
I'm gonna
into?
kind of date myself because I always kind of try to like listen involved in new, but my era really is like Death Cab for Cutie, the
Mhm.
This
Decemberists.
is just like
Just like Eli
yesterday.
Arnold. He said
Hey,
almost the
It's like the
exact
same
same.
exact
Yeah,
thing.
it's
Yes.
He
a,
even he said the Decemberists. Did he say Death Cab for Cutie
I don't know
too?
if he
definitely
did,
said the
but actually
Decemberists.
that was one of my first concerts I went to was Death Cab.
Oh
I
really?
love
Yeah,
Death Cab, and
yeah,
so and the Shins and like
yeah.
that. So there was sort of a
Thank you for talking
era
He
about the
did talk
Shins.
about the
Eli
the
did.
era of indie rock, and particularly in Portland, where this was like the mecca
It was,
of
yeah.
indie rock and indie pop, and going to shows every night, whether I was playing myself or watching other people.
So were you playing indie rock?
The thing about it is I think we were trying, but we weren't really like
What were you playing? What do you play?
my favorite band at the time. So when I started the band, my favorite band at the time was Weezer.
Oh,
So
Oh
sure,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I think a lot of Weezer influence. So it was sort of what I would say is geek rock. We didn't take ourselves too seriously. That's why the fake mustache. It was always sort of like
I see.
half fun,
I
half
see.
party, half
Yeah.
music. And it was I won't stand by our music being great, but we had a really, really good time.
What instruments
Yeah,
did you
that's what I was
play?
looking at.
I mean, in the bands,
Yeah.
I've always played guitar, but I also can play the drums and a little bit of keyboard. Like anybody that's in music, you can pick a little something of
Okay,
everything.
yeah.
A
The
little bit of
bass,
everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
I
great.
love music.
Drums is one of the few things I could play, but not
Oh,
really. I don't really
Really?
practice
Hmm.
anymore. I have like a
yeah,
little Yamaha
That's
table
cool.
set.
yeah.
But yeah, I was just gonna ask that if you weren't gonna answer that, or like if you weren't actually in a band, I was gonna ask if you had a secret talent. But I guess that is kind of your.
I don't know if it was a talent. No, honestly, it was an interest, but I'm not sure anybody that watched me play guitar would be like, "You're super
Do you
talented." That
still
thing.
play?
I was just playing yesterday.
Really?
It's a great way
Yeah.
to when I get
That's
stressed
great.
out or so this is true. When I used to try child sex abuse cases, I would take my guitar out and in the trial, not every time, but when it was a really hot trial, we had an hour lunch break. I'd rush back to my office across the street, grab my guitar, go down to the bus station and play guitar for like 45 minutes because
Really?
I found I would start seeing cases in different ways. So
Like out in public?
yeah, I just like reactivates your
Wow, you
brain.
were
Like
that
it's
guy. The prosecutor went from the
It's a way to
courtroom to the.
decompress, kind
Yeah,
of
that's
thing.
amazing.
decompress, but also I think that's that like right brain, left brain. Like when you're just seeing
Yes,
this thing
that's
over and
right.
over, you can just get a new perspective and you can draw back
Right.
for a second. And music does that for me. So I still, when I can, I try to do that. As bad as I am at piano, I'll still go to my piano and
Huh.
play when I'm struggling to figure something out and
Wow,
see if
wow.
that'll give me a new idea.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
I've never asked you that. Do you ever do like a talent show or something like that?
I'm the worst. I have no creative
Okay.
abilities.
Can you juggle? I can juggle.
Zero. No, I can't do any of that. I mean, my lane is so narrow.
Okay.
I'm not proud of
That's
it, but it's
okay.
just I accept it. I am who I am, but I have no capacity.
Well,
There are a
you're
couple of things I have no capacity for, creativity. And I mean, I like music. I can't do anything with it. I like it. And spatial reasoning. Like I will never
I don't even
be
know what that
able to take
means.
something apart and put it back together. That
Okay.
will never
Okay.
happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say I would consider you a broadcaster, and that's kind of a talent. So
That's nice of you.
yeah.
That's very generous.
I asked some of these yesterday, so she'll know these. But do you have a favorite Taco Bell item?
Oh, I'm
I'll say that yesterday I did not get a good answer. So I'm
what's not a good
well, I
answer?
gotta.
Yeah, for
Eli
me,
said
like he
he's like,
doesn't
I don't
like
even
it.
like Taco Bell. So I'm like, all right,
Yeah, that's gonna have not a good answer. I probably prefer not to go to Taco Bell, and I'd probably get an iced tea if I went there, or
Baja
the
Blast,
A Baja
quesadilla.
Blast, yeah.
quesadilla.
Yeah.
Aren't they the only ones who have the Baja
Yeah,
Blast?
it's a big deal. Yeah, they had a. I don't know if you guys follow the whole Stanley mugs, the Stanley tumblers.
I
Uh-huh.
don't, but my kids do.
Those
Yeah.
things go on like reselling websites, but they had a Baja Blast Stanley that was, and now it's like going for like hundreds of dollars because they
Oh,
only did like 50 of them. But
At some
anyway,
point, I need somebody to explain to me the massive
I do too.
Stanley, like why somebody wants to
Man, they have really
chug that much
marketed.
fluid and carry it
I
around
know.
everywhere.
it's it's funny at my work too. Now they're everywhere. They're like there's like half the staff has them, especially women, and I don't know
Yeah,
why, but
it is. It's a
I
female thing.
the genius to me is because I buy too many sneakers and watches, and they basically did that same game plan of like we'll just do different colorways,
Right.
different logos, and then
That's
people
true.
just buy them like
It's an
crazy.
accessory then.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they have accessories. Sadly, I know this because I have an 11-year-old. They have the accessories for the Stanley.
Oh,
Okay.
really?
There's a straw topper.
All these little
There's things that
add-ons.
hang off of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I know. I know. I wish I didn't know that.
I'll take the quesadilla though. I do get that sometimes, and I'm.
Do you just get the plain quesadilla?
How did you know what? No, what I was gonna say. My hot
Because I've
take.
seen you order. I don't know.
My hot take
I
is
have
I
an idea
don't
about
get.
what you
I
like.
say I don't want the special sauce, which is their jalapeno sauce, and most people like that on there. But I'm like, I don't want it. I just want
No,
cheese and
just with
quesadilla.
cheese.
But I don't know.
Okay.
They
I'm a
also have
weird.
some sort of like a donut hole
Yeah,
thing that,
Cinnabon or something.
yeah, something that's not
Yeah.
too bad either.
Okay.
Yeah.
She already answered this, so I already know.
I did. It was
Supreme
a long
Supreme
list.
taco or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite fair ride or like Disneyland ride or something like that? I feel like you've probably been to some state fairs this year.
Yeah.
I have, but I haven't gone on
He's
any.
probably not ready,
Yeah,
right?
you're talking to people. Yeah.
Hey, there's Will Lathrop.
You know, yeah, probably just for nostalgia, Space Mountain at
Yeah.
Okay. I was talking about that yesterday.
at Disneyland
Mhm.
because I grew up in the Star Wars era,
Mhm.
and it was like, you could, as a little kid, you
Space travel.
it was like I'm really in
Sure.
a spaceship, and
Yeah.
I took my son on that, and he was 5 at the time, might have been a little young to get on that. He survived it,
Some
but
high tennis shoes.
yeah.
He's tall enough.
He's tall, but even then, I felt like a kid getting on that ride. I love it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. This one might be the weirdest one, but well,
Okay.
I don't know. All right. So I want to know your nut rankings.
Oh, that's not weird at all.
Okay.
I am ready for this.
You got this locked and loaded.
Yeah.
I'll just say mine is pistachio, peanut, cashew. Those are my top 3.
Cashew's not a nut.
And she shot that
I
down.
don't understand people's love for cashews.
Oh, I love cashews too.
So for me, walnut is the highest.
Okay.
Oh my
okay.
goodness.
But
My mind is blown right
it's
now.
like something you have
Okay.
to take
It's-
in small bits because
We
your
did
mouth will
agree
break
that
out.
it's the healthiest, probably.
Yeah.
But I like it. I like the
Good
way it
for
tastes,
you.
and then I think it would be walnut, Brazilian.
I like
no,
Brazil nuts too.
Walnut, pecan, Brazilian,
Mm.
peanut. That's
Okay.
yeah.
Pecan's the
Okay.
one I was trying to remember yesterday.
Pine number 4. I think
Pine is
pine,
underrated.
very underrated.
And
nut.
hazelnuts are underrated.
Yeah,
And that's a
hazelnuts are
good
very-
Oregon
Wait,
nut.
hazelnut would have to
That
be
is a
higher than
great
that.
Oregon
Yeah,
nut.
hazelnuts are good.
Hazelnut's number 2. I forgot about hazelnut. Can
Oh
I
my
move that one
goodness.
back
Put
up
those
there?
in a salad.
I
Yeah.
confuse hazelnut and macadamia.
Do you
we were
really?
talking
No,
about
macadamia
yesterday.
nuts are like really greasy. You don't want to.
Okay.
Yeah. Hazelnuts are.
I don't know if
Hazelnuts are classy.
They are.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Toast them a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we got a lot of good new ones in here.
Gosh,
I'm glad I remembered pecan though, because that's what I was. This intern we had is 19 at my work. She got those, and that's what started this whole thing. And I was just like, I don't. Aside from pecan pie, which is great, shout out to
Right.
that pie. I'm just like,
Have
But
you-
but she had one that was like really flavored. That was really
like
good.
people will butter them
Well,
and
yeah.
then roast them.
If you put,
I
yeah.
guess if you butter and roast
Butter and
anything, a
sugar,
napkin it
yeah.
probably would taste
That's
good.
100%.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Okay.
I genuinely, there's probably no nut that I don't like. I really like all nuts.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'll have to check out. I don't know if I had pine. I don't know if I've ever.
Oh,
had
Oh my gosh,
on a
they're so good.
salad or in like pasta.
Oh, the
Yes,
little, like,
so
thin
good.
ones.
Mhm,
Yeah,
They're
okay.
white and yeah. But yeah, you can just get, they are kind of hard to, I think you have to go to the baking section
Yeah.
maybe to find
It's
them,
like in
which
a
is
big
weird.
bag or
And they're
something.
No, they're not in a
expensive.
big bag. They're in a small. It's annoying.
Oh, it's in like a shaker.
They're in a small bag. They're in a small,
Yeah.
usually plastic bag.
Okay.
And he's right. They're annoyingly expensive. Like macadamia nuts. Honestly, they're
Yeah.
annoyingly expensive.
They're the
but
bougie nut.
yeah, they're
Okay.
they're bougier than hazelnut, I would say. Wouldn't
Yeah.
you? Pine
Yes.
nuts, yeah.
Yes.
What about, I'll extend this a little bit because I also like sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds.
Mhm.
Oh,
Is
okay.
there any of those that you really, I guess we're kind of blending these categories
I
into
don't think I have that discriminant of like immediately you said those like, oh, I'd eat some sunflower seeds right
Like,
now
who
if you had
wouldn't?
them.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't want to crack them myself. I
No.
used to play Little League baseball and you
Unshelled.
pack
Yeah.
and you're like,
Yeah.
It's like the dugout thing.
I'm
that
done
you-
with those days. But yeah, good
Yeah.
sunflower seeds and yeah, even pumpkin seeds if they're done well. If you ever had somebody roast them themselves and they're still soggy or wet and it's just like
Disgusting.
disgusting.
Yeah,
But
agreed.
a really good pumpkin seeds.
They're
Again,
not
put a
for
little
me.
butter on it, put some salt on it, and roast it. It's gonna taste good. You know.
Okay. All right. All right, cool. Those are all my funny questions I
Yeah.
had. But yeah, thanks for coming again today.
Thanks, Will.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, should people can still donate to you, right? I'm guessing. Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. Yeah.
So
He's
so,
like, no. Yeah.
The
so
window's closed.
It's
No.
Will Lathrop. If anybody wants to know more about my campaign, willathrop.com or follow me on any of the major social medias. And yeah, one thing I mentioned earlier, but I think it's important is that I've been able to very keep pace on fundraising by fundraising mostly here in Oregon and fundraising in a lot of small dollars. People giving me $15 or $20. It makes me both makes me proud that I have that grassroots support, but
Yeah, it should.
but also it's just important. I mean, it's important that just like everybody's votes should count. It shouldn't be one or two people throwing money from out of state and
Right.
controlling an election. So that's not how it should work.
Is there there's no limit on that? Is there?
No.
There's no limit on state contributions
No.
because I remember that.
You can mortgage your house and give
Right.
it to me.
That's right. I remember that from Mike Schmidt and Nathan's campaigns for district attorney for Multnomah County because weirdly that's a state office.
Yeah.
It's actually not even a county office, so there was no limits. And I just remember thinking, I thought we were into. I mean, at least Portland is
Yeah.
very
It seems
obsessed
like
with limits
something that would
and
change
matching,
eventually,
and
but
I don't.
know.
But then
It
it
is.
hurts the legislature, so why would they usher that in?
It's going to change in 2026. They're going to start
Is
putting
it?
limits on it. They're going to do the federal system, but we all see the federal system. It's not like money doesn't buy. It just
Right.
they
Right.
just create new loopholes of ways people can give
Sure.
money. And that's just
But I guess the
reality of it.
point is people can give you unlimited donations, but you're saying any amount is important to you.
Yeah, 5, 10, 15. Sometimes it's not that money makes a difference. It's just that's another person they're putting their name on my campaign saying, I support this person. I'm
Mhm.
willing to put a few dollars on it. So it's helpful. And when you donate, you also get our newsletter and you sort of get sucked into the Will Lathrop universe of what's happening in our race.
It's
Yeah.
pretty big. It's kind of like the Marvel universe.
Very
I'm just
similar,
kidding.
very similar.
I'm just kidding. I don't even like Marvel, so but I do like your universe. So.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Yeah. Thanks so
Thanks so
much.
much.
For coming
Thank
in.
you.
Thanks for having me.